TrueStory Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
TrueStory Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Autumn Bennett pressed her palm against the cool glass of the taxi window as the familiar skyline of Seattle slid into view. The spires of downtown's high-rise towers were shrouded in an early morning mist, the Space Needle's silhouette fading in and out like a ghostly beacon. She drew in a shaky breath, clutching the tan leather handle of her wheeled carry-on, the gentle click of its wheels keeping pace with the taxi's smooth glide. 2 months ago, she'd kissed her husband on the cheek and driven east to Spokane to care for her ailing mother, Evelyn Brooks, whose health had deteriorated faster than Autumn could believe. But today, after 8 weeks of round-the-clock doctor's visits, 2 sleepless nights spent listening for her mother's soft breathing and countless whispered prayers, Autumn was finally making the journey back home. The thought of stepping back into her own life, her own apartment, filled her with equal measures of relief and trepidation. She imagined the moment she'd open the front door, expecting the warmth of her marriage and the familiar clutter of her shared world with Jason Caldwell. Instead, she worried she might find something broken in their carefully balanced routine. The taxi turned onto Olive Avenue, and Autumn recognized the dark wood front doors of the brick-clad building she and Jason had chosen together months before their wedding. The driver slowed as they rolled beneath a series of etched glass canopies, and Autumn paid him with trembling fingers. "Thank you," she managed, offering a tight smile. She hoisted her carry-on out of the trunk and stood for a moment in the quiet shade of the entryway, her heart pounding in her ears. Inside the lobby, the receptionist gave her a polite nod. "Welcome back, Ms. Bennett." Autumn returned the nod, but couldn't find her voice to say more. She hurried to the elevator, 2 quick taps of her key fob, and felt the doors slide shut with a soft whoosh. As the numbers lit up 3, 4, 5, she closed her eyes. She pictured the moment she'd step off on the penthouse floor, see Jason's dark brown hair leaning over his laptop at the kitchen island, smell the cinnamon apple scent he always kept simmering on the stove. But something inside her whispered that life might have shifted in her absence in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The elevator chimed, and Autumn crossed the short hallway into the spacious living room. A floor-to-ceiling window revealed a breathtaking panoramic view of Elliott Bay. Orion's chairs, a plush leather pair they'd splurged on, stood arranged around a glass coffee table that still bore the imprint of last night's takeout containers. A stack of mail rested on the console table, unopened. Autumn hesitated just inside the doorway, studying the room like a visitor. "Jason," she called, her voice small. Echo answered her. She set her carry-on down and slipped off her coat, revealing a slender dress she'd worn to her mother's bedside just hours earlier. She stepped toward the kitchen, the hardwood floors creaking softly under her boots. A single slice of chartreuse post-it note stuck to the fridge door caught her eye. "Back in 15. Coffee in the thermos. Love you.
G."
Autumn's chest tightened. 15 minutes. Did that mean he'd only just left? Was he already gone longer than he meant to be? She opened the fridge door and found a stainless steel thermos perched on the middle shelf beside a mason jar of leftover gazpacho. She unscrewed the lid, inhaled the rich aroma of freshly ground beans, and let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her hand trembled as she reached for the mason jar, only to stop midair. Another thought fluttered through her mind. What if he'd changed? What if the endless deadlines at the tech startup where he worked had stolen more than just his time? What if she returned to a house where her place had shifted, or even disappeared? Her chest tightened again. Autumn closed her eyes, pressing a hand to her lower belly as if bracing herself. Then she exhaled, reminding herself that she had fought through worse. Her mother's decline had broken her heart day after day, yet Autumn had endured. Surely she could face whatever lay behind the next door. Just as she set the jar back on its shelf, the front door clicked. Autumn straightened, smoothing the front of her dress, heart pounding anew. Jason stepped in, phone in hand, his dark eyes widening when he saw her. For a moment, he looked stunned, then relief and something else softened his expression. "Autumn," he said, voice thick. He laid the phone on the counter, crossing the room in 2 strides. He paused a heartbeat away, his hand lifting to brush a stray lock of hair from her forehead. "You're home." Tears glistened in Autumn's eyes. She nodded once, tight against the swell of emotion. "I'm home." He leaned forward, closing the distance for the first real kiss since she'd left. Autumn felt the warmth of his arms around her, the steady beat of his heart against her chest. For that brief moment, the world outside, her mother's fragile state, the uncertainty that had welled up inside her, seemed to fall away. And yet, as she melted into his embrace, she couldn't shake a lingering doubt. Something inside her whispered that before they could truly come together again, she would have to uncover the secrets that had shrouded their home in her absence. But for now, in that quiet Seattle penthouse bathed in morning light, Autumn let herself believe that the long-awaited chapter of reunion had finally begun. Autumn's lips trembled against the faint breeze flowing in from the bay window as she and Jason stood in a stunned embrace. Before she could recalibrate her pounding heart, the gentle click of her apartment's smart lock echoed through the foyer. Jason's brow furrowed. "Did you?" he asked, half turning toward the front door. Autumn shook her head, confusion rippling through her. "I didn't see anyone." The door swung open without warning, and in stepped a young woman whom Autumn had never seen before. She paused in the threshold, slender, poised, her jet-black hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail, wearing a cream-colored trench coat and calf-high boots. In her hand, she held a small leather satchel and an air of self-assurance, as though she belonged there. "Hi," the stranger said, her tone bright but reserved. She offered a polite nod to Jason and then to Autumn.
"I'm Skylar Pierce."
"Your mother and I go way back." Autumn and Jason exchanged a glance that threaded together surprise, bewilderment, and rising alarm. Autumn's pulse jumped. She opened her mouth to speak, but found no words, only disbelief. "Mother?" Jason echoed, stepping forward. "Mom never mentioned you were coming." Skylar smiled, a soft curve that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Vivian said I could stay for a few days while I get back on my feet in town." Her gaze flicked to Autumn. "I hope that's okay." The apartment felt suddenly too small, script lights illuminating the exchange like a scene accelerating toward a cliffhanger. Autumn's mind raced. "Vivian? Did Jason know? Why didn't I know?" Before Autumn could respond, Jason retrieved a phone from his pocket. "Mom, are you sure? Did you tell Autumn?" Skylar raised her hand, palm outward.
"No worries.
"I'll text Mom and let her know you're back." She tapped a quick message and slid the phone back into Jason's hand. He exhaled, glancing between Mother's name lighting up his screen. "Mom. Welcome home." "Jason." And the composed stranger. He turned to Autumn, eyebrows drawn together. "Sounds like she's already expecting you, too." Autumn swallowed around a lump. Her throat felt dry, as though this penthouse, once a symbol of comfort, had become foreign territory. She forced a small smile. "Well, welcome, Skylar. Would you like something to drink?" Skylar nodded. "Coffee would be great, thanks." Jason and Autumn reached for mugs as though on automatic pilot, the hum of the espresso machine filling the suddenly charged air. Autumn busied herself with grinding beans, her pulse hammering. Across from her, Skylar waited quietly, her dark eyes watching every movement. Once Autumn set a steaming mug before her. Skylar accepted it with a subtle tilt of thanks. She sipped carefully, then set the cup down. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said, calmly but firmly, as though noticing Autumn's unsettled expression. "Vivian told me things have been complicated lately." Autumn bristled. "You mean when I was gone?" Skylar inclined her head. "She said you needed to focus on your mom." Jason shot Autumn a look of guilt. Autumn pressed her lips together, reminding herself to stay civil. This was, after all, her mother-in-law's friend's daughter. But something didn't add up. Skylar's presence felt too deliberate, her tone too prepared. "You know," Autumn said carefully, "Mom never mentioned I'd have company." Skylar set down her mug, eyes flickering briefly. "She did mention, but I know she's been under stress." She raised her palm again. "I didn't mean to startle you." In the hush that followed, a low hum of the city beyond their windows reminded Autumn that this encounter was no dream. She straightened, closing the gap between them. "Okay, Skylar. Tell me, how long will you be staying?" "Just until I find an apartment," Skylar said, her voice smooth. "A week, maybe 2. Autumn nodded. "All right. Well, we don't have any spare rooms, but there's a fold-out sofa in the guest alcove." She gestured down the hallway. Skylar's smile widened. "Perfect, thank you." She set her satchel down by the console table and pulled out a delicate framed photograph of 2 women hugging, one unmistakably Vivian Barrett, the other a younger Mrs. Barrett in her 20s. Skylar placed the frame on the console. "That's her and Mom in college." Autumn's shoulders tightened. "I see." Jason stepped in, looping an arm around Autumn's waist. "Why don't we show Skylar around? Autumn, why don't you head to the kitchen and get us some pastries?" Autumn nodded mechanically, feeling both relieved and wary to be sent away. As she slipped into the adjoining kitchen, her coat still draped over a stool, she heard Jason guide Skylar's footsteps down the hallway. Once they were out of sight, Autumn pressed her palm against the cool marble counter, steadying her breathing. There's something about her, she thought. Skylar smiled easily, but her eyes slid over Autumn and lingered a moment too long on the invitation card for Autumn and Jason's wedding framed beside the coffee maker. Autumn returned to the living room with a plate of croissants, determined to keep her composure. Skylar accepted a pastry with a crisp nod of thanks. The prison of politeness clenched Autumn's chest. She had to learn everything she could about this well-dressed stranger before trusting her. Across the bay-glass window, raindrops began to scatter, each a small drumbeat on the pane. And somewhere between the first taste of morning pastry and Skylar's unshakably calm stare, Autumn Bennett realized this was no casual houseguest. An uninvited game had begun, and everything she cherished was at stake. Autumn Bennett woke before dawn the next morning to the muffled hum of rain against the penthouse windows. She lay still in their king-sized bed, listening for any sign of Jason stirring. But the room was too silent, eerily, unforgivably silent. She pulled back the comforter, slipped out onto the plush carpet, and padded barefoot toward the living room, her heart thudding with an unshakable sense of foreboding. In the kitchen, the rich scent of fresh coffee tangled with the crisp tang of citrus, something Jason never brewed before 7 a.m. Yet there it was, 2 steaming mugs sitting side by side on the butcher block island, and a small plate of croissants arranged as neatly as museum exhibits. Autumn picked up one mug, rotated it in her hands, and whispered Jason's name. Her voice echoed against the cool tile. A soft footstep behind her made her jump. Jason Caldwell stood in the doorway of the breakfast nook, hair tousled as though he'd just run a hand through it. He rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand, then offered Autumn a tired, uncertain smile. "Morning," he said. "I thought we could talk over coffee." Autumn drew a breath. "You're up early." He shifted, glancing at the empty seat across from him. "Couldn't sleep." He nodded toward the mugs. "I made us coffee." She hesitated only a moment before she sat down. Forcing herself to sip, she held his gaze. For a heartbeat, she saw the man she married. Warm, familiar, someone she trusted with every secret of her heart. Then reality flickered. He'd ignored her messages for weeks, sided with Skylar Pierce, and allowed their home to become a stranger's playground. "Jason," Autumn began, her voice tight. He set his mug down. "I know this has all been weird." He ran a hand through his hair. "Mom and Skylar said you weren't. You weren't just home for a visit. They said you were gone for good." Her heart sank. "Skylar told you that?" He grimaced. "She said you checked out emotionally, that you were putting all your energy into caring for your mom, and not into our marriage." He exhaled. "And Mom, she said she couldn't watch you ignore this house like it wasn't your own." Autumn's fingers tightened around her mug. She recalled Skylar's poised calm, the way she'd maneuvered into their lives. So, you believed her? Jason winced. I believed you'd been under a lot of stress. He frowned at the coffee foam. But when she said you were selfish, I acted fast to protect everyone. Protect. Autumn's voice rose. By letting a stranger waltz in and call me a thief? Jason closed his eyes.
I'm sorry.
Autumn's breath came in shuddering bursts. Don't say you're sorry. Tell me why you didn't even ask any questions. Why you believed Skylar without talking to me first. Jason leaned forward, elbows on the table. I guess I was tired, overwhelmed. Work's been insane, product launch next month, investor meetings, all that. He swallowed. And when Mom called crying about you abandoning her, I panicked. Autumn's chest ached. All those evenings she'd sent, "How's Mom?" texts that went unread. All those times she cried herself to sleep thinking of him, and he never looked up. So, it was easier to believe a perfectly dressed 24-year-old who showed up out of nowhere? He flinched. It wasn't like that. Then how is it? Autumn challenged. Because right now all I see is that you believe her over me, over your wife of 3 years. Jason's face crumpled. He ran a hand through his hair again. I was stupid. I never wanted to hurt you. She held up a hand. Don't. Because the hurt is already here. They sat in strained silence, rain drumming a ragged rhythm above them. Finally, Jason stood and paced to the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the gray Puget Sound. Autumn watched him, her anger softening into worry. He looked lost, as though he'd forgotten how to be himself. Autumn, he said without turning, voice raw. What can I do? She set her mug on its saucer, the click echoing like a starting pistol. Start by telling your mother and Skylar to leave. This is our home, not some halfway house for strangers. Jason's shoulders slumped. You want me to tell my own mother that?
Yes.
Autumn met his gaze. I want you to stand up for me. Us. Before this gets even more out of hand. He looked down at his coffee, then back to her with a resolve she hadn't seen in weeks.
Okay.
You're right. Autumn exhaled, tension easing off her shoulders. She reached for his hand. Thank you. He stood, offering her a weak but genuine smile. I'll talk to her this morning. I promise. Just then, a soft knock at the front door jolted them both. Jason glanced toward the hallway. That must be Skylar. Autumn watched Jason nearly freeze. He took a deep breath and let go of her hand. I'll handle it. She slid off her stool and caught his arm. Remember why we're here for each other. He nodded and squared his shoulders.
Right.
Jason strode down the hall, Autumn trailing just behind. As the door swung open, Skylar Pierce stood there clutching her leather satchel, eyes bright, too bright. Behind her, Mrs. Barrett peered into the apartment, wearing a concerned frown. Autumn braced herself, ready for the storm she knew was coming, but also determined that this time, she would not be the one who lost. Inside, the penthouse lights gleamed on polished wood and brushed steel, casting bold shadows across the marble floors. 3 figures, Autumn, Jason, and Mrs. Barrett, stood in a tense tableau. And at the pivot of it all was Skylar, the stranger who had come to upend everything Autumn believed about family, trust, and home. The air crackled with suppressed fury as Autumn lifted her chin and addressed Mrs. Barrett, her voice steady and clear. Mom, Jason and I need our home back. And we need you and Skylar to understand that you can't just move in and call the shots. Mrs. Barrett's jaw tightened. Skylar's eyes flickered. But in Autumn's chest, a spark ignited, an unshakable belief that, together, she and Jason could navigate this rift and reclaim the marriage and home they had built. And just like that, the family's fragile equilibrium teetered on the edge, ushering in a confrontation that would redefine every relationship under that roof. Rain pelted the penthouse windows so hard it sounded as though the sky itself might burst. Autumn Bennett sat on the edge of her neatly made bed, phone pressed to her ear, voice trembling. Evelyn's blood pressure just spiked again, she whispered, her knuckles white around the phone. Yes, Dr. Patel, I'm on my way. She dropped her phone onto the nightstand. Sliding down so she was crouched beside the bed, rain soaked from her frantic dash through the hallway. The memory of Mrs. Barrett's canary yellow Mercedes SUV whipping around the corner on Olive Avenue flickered behind her eyelids. Just 2 hours earlier, Autumn had sent Morgan Caldwell a simple text. Mom's reading improved. Maybe the steroids are working. I'll keep you posted. But Morgan's reply had cut through her hopeful haze. Autumn, she's in the ER. BP spiked, they're admitting her. The world had shifted beneath her feet. Autumn bolted upright, heart pounding. She scooped up her bag, snagged her raincoat from the closet, and raced down the hall. The kitchen was empty. Jason had apparently already left. A half-drunk mug of coffee peered up at her from the island. She grabbed it, drained its contents, then hurled it into the sink. Moments later, she burst out the front door, rain plastering her hair against her face as the lobby's glass doors whooshed open. She practically slid across the tiled floor to the elevator. 2 frantic taps of her key fob summoning it in a heartbeat. The car shuddered downward, passing floors at a vertiginous pace. At G, the speed slowed, and Autumn lurched out into the lobby again. The doorman gave her a sympathetic look, but said nothing as she rushed through the gleaming lobby and into the lobby of the building next door, Mrs. Barrett's condo tower, where Evelyn Brooks had moved after selling her Spokane home. By the time Autumn reached the reception desk, her lungs had begun to burn. She dropped her ID, wordlessly pointed toward the emergency stairwell, and scrambled up 3 flights of stairs. Outside the emergency room entrance, Jason stood with his coat buttoned wrong and sky-high anxiety on his face. He saw her coming and opened his arms. But Autumn shot past him, running inside with the single-minded urgency of a woman determined to save her mother. Inside the fluorescent-lit corridor, Autumn found Mrs. Barrett pacing like a caged tiger. Phone pressed to her ear. As Autumn approached, Mrs. Barrett snapped the phone shut. "Evelyn's stable now," Mrs. Barrett said, voice trembling with gratitude and something else, shame. They put her on a low-sodium 4-drip and sedated her. Autumn rounded the corner into the small waiting area, where Jason was pacing in front of the double glass doors that led to the ER. "Jason, what happened?" Autumn asked, scanning his face. He shook his head. Dr. Patel said her blood pressure shot up to 210 over 120. They think it might be a reaction to the new medication. Autumn's heart clenched. Her mother had been on a rigorous regimen of meds, corticosteroids, blood thinners, cardiac support. Each came with side effects, but this spike was acute. Before Autumn could process, Mrs. Barrett tugged her arm. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "This was my fault, my fault. I asked Skylar to bring over some of Evelyn's old prescription bottles, thinking we could sort her dosages. Maybe something got mixed up." Autumn's pulse leaped. She took a deep breath to steady herself. "You asked Skylar?" Mrs. Barrett's eyes flickered away. She offered to help. "I didn't know." The corridor's overhead speakers crackled. "Family of Evelyn Brooks, room 12A, please proceed." Autumn, Jason, and Mrs. Barrett surged forward, nearly colliding with the sliding doors as they opened. Inside room 12A, a young nurse in teal scrubs adjusted the 4-pump beside a reclining hospital bed. Evelyn Brooks lay under a pale blue blanket, eyes closed, chest rising gently. Autumn approached, sliding into a metal chair at her mother's side. She reached out, gently brushing a stray lock of silver hair from her forehead. "Hey, Mom," Autumn whispered, voice thick. She pressed her hand against her mother's. "I'm here." Evelyn's eyelids fluttered open, and she gave a faint smile. "Autumn, baby," her voice rasped. "I'm so glad." Tears welled in Autumn's eyes. "I'm here, Mom. You just rest, okay?" The nurse stepped into the corner, scribbling notes. Autumn turned back to Mrs. Barrett and Jason. "Tell me exactly what happened," Autumn said, voice low but firm. Mrs. Barrett inhaled shakily. "Skylar found an old bottle of your mother's diuretic pills. They were left over from before her move. Skylar was refilling Evelyn's pill organizer, and she thought an extra dose might help. Then she couldn't find the label, so she grabbed from the wrong bottle. Jason closed his eyes. Autumn felt her world tilt. Her chest tightened. Her mother had been hurt in this apartment complex by someone she trusted. When did Skylar do this? Autumn pressed. Last night, Mrs. Barrett said, voice breaking. She came over to help. Said she was bored. I went out for some groceries. She thought she was doing a kindness. Autumn's mind raced. Skylar, glossy-haired Skylar, had manipulated her mother's medications and almost killed her. A sense of betrayal coiled in her gut. The nurse approached. Evelyn's vital signs are stable now, but she'll need monitoring for another 24 hours. No visitors for a bit. She needs rest. Autumn nodded. Mrs. Barrett closed her hand around Autumn's. I'll make sure Skylar leaves and gets back to Spokane. I'll fix this. Autumn withdrew her hand, staring at her mother's pale but steady breathing. No, she said softly, but without question. I'm the one who'll decide who stays. She turned to Jason. Can you handle getting Skylar's things? I need to stay here. Jason nodded, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. I've got you. Meanwhile, Mrs. Barrett dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Autumn recognized the silent apology in her mother-in-law's gaze. She had trusted the wrong person. Autumn stood. She took one last look at Evelyn, smoothing her mother's hair again. I love you, she whispered. Evelyn's eyes fluttered shut in response. Exiting the room, Autumn found a small alcove outside the nurse's station. She sank onto a bench, rain still drumming against the windows. The betrayal cut deeper than the fear of losing her mother. And as she sat in the cold fluorescent light, she realized a pivotal truth. She could not rely on anyone to protect her. She alone would guard her mother's health, her marriage, and her home. Her phone buzzed, a text from Morgan. Mom's awake. I'm on my way to Seattle. Autumn tapped out a reply. Thank you. She thrust her hand in her pocket, finding a crumpled post-it note from Skylar's initial arrival. I hope you'll be okay with me staying. Autumn crumpled it into a ball, the paper wrinkling like a discarded promise. As the rain washed the city in silver streaks, Autumn rose from the bench, resolve hardening in her chest. The first crisis had struck, her mother's near-fatal overdose. But this would not be the last. The question now was, how far would Skylar Pierce push her lies before Autumn stopped her for good? Steeling herself, Autumn stepped back into the corridor, ready to confront the storms raging inside her family and the one still building beyond these hospital walls. 2 days after her mother's hospitalization, Autumn Bennett found herself pacing the polished hardwood floors of her former penthouse, now feeling more like a crime scene than the place she once called home. The adrenaline rush of the ER crisis had faded into a dull ache of betrayal. Every glance at Skylar Pierce's empty guest alcove stirred Autumn's resolve. She would uncover the truth behind Skylar's polished smile and uninvited presence. That evening, while Jason was late at yet another investor dinner and Mrs. Barrett was off apologizing profusely at the hospital, Autumn slipped into the guest alcove. She retrieved a small black recorder, no bigger than a business card, tucked inside her purse. In the dim glow of the alcove's reading lamp, she fitted the recorder beneath the sofa cushion, pressed its on switch, and slid it back just far enough to be concealed from casual glance. Her pulse fluttered as she rose and moved to the adjoining den. There, she had installed the second recorder inside a hardcover copy of The Art of War, wedged between 2 volumes on the bookshelf. Every click of her pen, as she marked the device's position, felt impossibly loud in the near silence. Autumn straightened, smoothing her blouse, telling herself she was doing what she had to do to protect her mother and her marriage. The next morning, Autumn woke early, her heart already pounding. She brewed coffee in the kitchen and poured it into her favorite navy tumbler. She settled at the dining island with a stack of files, copies of medical records, Mrs. Barrett's signed statement about Skylar mixing up medications, and audio clips from the hospital's waiting room recorded by Morgan on his phone. The latter captured Mrs. Barrett's guilty confession. But Autumn needed more. She needed to confirm Skylar's intentions and confront her inescapable deceit.
Her phone pinged.
A message from Morgan Caldwell. "I'm here. Where are you?" She tapped back. "Office/library. Bring the hospital notes." Morgan arrived 10 minutes later, carrying a slim envelope of charts and lab results. He looked as drawn as Autumn felt, pale skin, dark circles, despair in his eyes. He laid the envelope on the counter. "Thanks," Autumn said, offering a tight smile. "We'll need everything." She gestured toward the bookshelf. "Audio devices are in place. I want your help retrieving the files tonight." Morgan nodded, leaning forward.
"Right.
"I'm glad you're doing this." Autumn glanced at the recorder's position in her fiction and strategy novel lineup. "I can't trust anyone else," she said, voice low. "Not Jason, not Mom, not even my own gut anymore. Skylar's toxic." Morgan's jaw clenched. "Mom's in the hospital another day. I'm keeping her company, making sure she doesn't get off any more mystery prescriptions." He ground out the word mystery as though it tasted bitter. Autumn drank her coffee. The bitter warmth grounded her. "Tonight, after everyone's asleep, we'll collect the recordings." She tapped a finger on the stack of hospital notes. "If Skylar's voice says anything that confirms she tampered with more than just meds, I'll confront her in front of Mom and Jason. No more secrets." Morgan gave a slow nod. "I'll be there." That night, the penthouse was eerily quiet. Autumn lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as rain drummed its familiar staccato on the windows. At 10:15 p.m., she slipped out of bed, sliding on loafers and a dark cardigan over her pajama top. Her heart beat so loudly she was certain Jason would hear it through the walls. She crept down the hallway and peeked around the corner into the living room. The floor lamp beside the sofa cast a soft pool of light, but Skylar's alcove beyond was dark and silent. Autumn stepped into the den, where the bookshelf recorder waited like a time bomb. She crouched and carefully extracted the acetate-thin device, its little red light now dim. Her breath caught. She slipped it into her cardigan pocket, then moved on to the sofa. Under the cushion, she found the second recorder and tucked it beside the first. 2 devices, 2 vantage points, one in the den, one in the guest alcove. Now came the hardest part, downloading the files. Morgan joined her at midnight, flashlight in hand. He knelt beside Autumn in the alcove, sympathetic yet determined. "Got it," he whispered. Autumn nodded, taking the 2 recorders. She pulled out a small USB cable from her purse, connected the first device to her laptop on the coffee table, and watched green progress bars flicker on the screen. The second device slipped into Morgan's hands. He connected it. Neither spoke. Outside, the rain intensified, as though the heavens were rooting for Autumn's clandestine mission. By 12:45 a.m., both recorders had unloaded their contents into 2 neatly labeled folders, den_recorder and guest alcove_recorder. Autumn exhaled and sat back on the sofa. "Let's hope one of these has what we need," she murmured. She clicked into the guest alcove_recorder first. The earliest files were Skylar's light footsteps as she entered on the afternoon of Autumn's return. Next came a clip of Skylar examining a jewelry box on the console table, muttering something too faint to make out. Then, Autumn's blood ran cold. A segment marked 6:23 p.m. captured Skylar retrieving several amber pill bottles from the kitchen cabinet. "What is she doing?" Morgan muttered, craning to hear. Autumn leaned in. The audio crackled, but the key moment was clear. "Skylar, soft, deliberate. If I switch Mom's meds with these, maybe she'll stay sedated longer, at least until I get that deposit." Autumn's hand flew to her mouth. She felt a nauseating rush. Deposit mortgage. Keep her quiet. Morgan froze. "She's planning to drug your mother for money." Autumn's blood hammered. Her gaze caught the second laptop screen. She clicked into den_recorder, scrolling for the timestamp around 6:23 p.m. Dozens of seconds of calm before a clip. In the den, Skylar's reflection in the hallway mirror could be heard approaching, her voice soft but resolute. "Skylar, it's only a few pills. She won't even notice until she's out of it. No one will suspect a thing." The final piece clicked into place. Skylar Pierce had not only accidentally mixed up medications, she had actively planned to drug Evelyn Brooks to keep her sedated, presumably to manipulate the household and ensure her own claim to the penthouse. Autumn felt dizzy. She closed her eyes, forced herself to breathe. Morgan placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "She's dangerous," he said quietly. Autumn opened her eyes, resolve hardening like forged steel. "This stops now." She fished her phone from her pocket and dialed Jason's number. His groggy voice answered on the second ring. "Autumn? What?" "Meet me in the den." "Now," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. She ended the call and faced Morgan. "You wake Mom and tell her I need her in the living room. I'm coming over." Morgan's eyes widened, but he nodded and hurried for the door. Autumn stood alone in the den, flicking through the audio clips again, making sure. Then she closed her laptop with a decisive snap and marched into the living room. The front door clicked open. Jason appeared, phone in hand. Confusion etched across his features. Behind him, Morgan guided Mrs. Barrett from her raincoat into the warmth of the apartment. Evelyn looked pale, but alert. Autumn gestured for them to sit on the sofa. She laid the 2 recorders and her laptop on the glass coffee table. Jason slumped next to her, shock in his eyes. "Mrs. Barrett sank onto the edge of her seat, pinching her lip. Evelyn leaned forward, alert despite her illness. "I have evidence," Autumn began, voice steady though her heart pounded. "Skylar Pierce intentionally tried to drug you, Mom. We have it on tape." Jason paled. Morgan pressed play on the first file. The hallway shimmered in the recording as Skylar's footsteps approached. Then her voice echoed clearly. "Skylar, I'll switch out the pills tonight. That way she won't interfere with anything. She won't notice until it's too late." Mrs. Barrett gasped. Evelyn pressed a hand to her chest. Autumn clicked over to the alcove file. In the softer audio, Skylar muttered, "Skylar, it's only a few pills. No one will connect it back to me. The deposit will clear, and then I'll have the keys." Silence crashed over them like a storm wave. Jason's face twisted in horror and guilt. Mrs. Barrett's eyes brimmed with tears. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Skylar's betrayal, her calculated, merciless plan, stood irrevocably exposed. Autumn felt both vindicated and heartbroken, vindicated in her suspicions, heartbroken for the innocence her mother had lost. And as she looked at each of them, husband, mother-in-law, mother, she realized the most dangerous lie had unraveled. Skylar Pierce's reign of deceit was over, but in its place lay a deeper fracture. The trust Autumn once took for granted would need to be rebuilt, and the road ahead would demand every ounce of her courage. In that tense stillness, Autumn Bennett made a silent vow. She would not rest until her family was safe, and Skylar Pierce paid for every lie, every secret, every betrayal. The morning after Autumn's explosive revelation, the penthouse dripped with the residue of betrayal, an atmosphere so heavy it felt as though the air itself refused to circulate. Autumn Bennett had watched her husband, Jason Caldwell, and her mother-in-law, Mrs. Vivian Barrett, reel from the recordings she'd uncovered. Skylar Pierce's malicious plot to drug Evelyn Brooks lay bare. But even as shock and outrage crackled through the household, Autumn's mind raced ahead. There was one more secret she suspected, and she was determined to expose it. She found her opportunity that evening. After a terse midday meeting with her mother at the hospital, where Evelyn had shaken her head in gratitude and heartbreak, Autumn returned home with steel in her spine. Jason was out. He claimed to be handling Skylar's eviction, though Autumn doubted he would face Skylar without clinging to every excuse. Mrs. Barrett had retreated to her own then empty apartment next door, in tears of regret and shame. That left Autumn alone to finish the investigation she'd begun, determined to know the full extent of Skylar's betrayal. She slipped into the dimly lit den, where the bookshelves and sofa sat like silent witnesses. The musty scent of neglected corners hung in the air, and Autumn's heart pounded in the hush. She retrieved her laptop, powered it on, and loaded the third recorder's files, captured, she suspected, by the hidden nanny cam she'd installed 2 nights ago inside the speaker console. She had positioned the camera to catch any late-night comings and goings in the living room, with a clear line of sight to the alcove where Skylar slept. As the login screen faded, Autumn's pulse fluttered with anticipation. She clicked into the folder marked living room_cam and scrolled to the timestamp closest to 1:42 a.m., the time when Skylar had whispered into her phone on the sofa. The video began with darkness. Only the faint glow of the city lights through the window showed the outlines of furniture. Then, like a phantom, Skylar emerged from the shadows, phone pressed to her ear. "Skylar, softly, he'll be here in 5 minutes. I told him everything's in place." Skylar shifted, tapping her heel against the carpet. Autumn held her breath as the camera captured the front door handle turning, Jason entering silently, as though gliding through the house on stealth mode. "Jason," whispering, "Sky's here?" Skylar caught his silhouette and turned with an elegant grace, her trench coat draped over one arm. Under the dim light, she looked less like the innocent friend of the family and more like a co-conspirator rehearsed in secrecy. "Skylar, he is." She stepped forward, and Jason closed the door behind him with exaggerated care. The camera caught the faint metallic click. Then, in the low light, their figures converged, first as 2 silhouettes, then as one in a soft embrace. Autumn's stomach knotted. She pressed pause, the screen freezing on their shadowed forms.
Kiss.
The dark shapes of their bodies aligned in a private, intimate choreography. She felt bile rise as she replayed the scene. Jason, the man she'd vowed to love. Skylar, the girl who'd slithered her way into their home. She counted the seconds, 6, 7, 10, until the camera's microphone caught the quiet rustle of Skylar's silk blouse as she guided Jason toward the alcove. Autumn clicked play again. Skylar, low, breathy. "I needed to know you'd come through. You didn't disappoint." Jason, voice husky. "You're stunning." Skylar, "You promised me this apartment. Just sign the papers tomorrow, and it's mine forever." Jason, "It'll be yours. And after that, well, then we can leave her behind. You and me." Autumn's hands shook as she fast-forwarded. In the grainy color of the footage, she saw Jason lift Skylar's chin, eyes dark with desire, and something more, possession. Skylar smiled up at him, triumphant, her hand sliding over his chest to rest where his heart would beat. "Skylar, after that, we won't have to hide." Autumn closed the laptop with a snap that shattered the silence. Her vision blurred with tears of anger and heartbreak. The truth had revealed itself in excruciating clarity. Skylar had seduced Jason, turning his love for his wife into a weapon. Together, they had plotted to inherit the penthouse, isolate Autumn, and strip her of every sanctuary. Anger surged through Autumn like lightning. In the hallway, she heard Jason's key in the lock. He entered, closing the door gently behind him, pausing at the threshold as though braced for a confrontation. Autumn turned, her face a mask of controlled fury. Jason's expression crumbled when he saw the closed laptop and Autumn's rigid posture. "Autumn," he began, voice uncertain. She held up a hand, fury shining in her eyes. "Don't," he swallowed. "Can we talk?" She shook her head.
No.
"Not until you explain this." She gestured at the laptop screen, now blank and dark. Jason looked at the laptop, then at her, guilt pooling in his eyes. "You weren't supposed to see that." "Because I was supposed to stay blind," Autumn said, voice taut. "You and Skylar were supposed to finish your plan tonight. Finalize the mortgage deposit, claim this place, and push me out." Jason's gaze flickered away. "It was never about pushing you out." He rubbed the back of his neck. I thought I loved her." Autumn laughed, hollow, bitter. "You thought you loved her? While you were married to me." He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry." She exhaled sharply, gathering herself. "I don't want apologies." She paced forward, storming toward him. "I want to know how you could do this. How you could lie to me, betray me, nearly kill my mother, and all for a stranger in a trench coat." Jason flinched, eyes darting. Skylar, she's vulnerable. She needed me. Skylar's vulnerable? Autumn echoed incredulously. She's manipulating your mother's health to get what she wants, and you're her savior? He didn't answer. His silence cut deeper than any words. Autumn closed in, heart pounding. You promised me forever. You promised me our life together. And for what? A cynical little girl who saw our marriage as her ticket to a life she never earned. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Autumn felt exhaustion wash over her. She absorbed the betrayal, the violation, the raw ache in her chest. Then she straightened, resolute. I'm done letting you and Skylar carve up my life. Jason finally met her gaze. Autumn. She cut him off. Get out. Both of you. Jason's face paled. What? She gestured toward the den. Pack your things. Leave by dawn. And don't come back. Jason's mouth fell open, but he said nothing, his silence a confession. Autumn locked eyes with him once more. If you ever loved me, you'll go. He looked at her as though seeing her for the first time, stricken, shattered, and utterly uncompromising. He squared his shoulders and left the laptop on the table, shuffling down the hallway as though in a daze. Autumn watched him go. The click of his boots on polished wood echoing like the final note of a requiem. When he reached the door, she heard it open and close once, twice, then the front door locked behind him. Silence returned, now absolute and blistering. Autumn's chest ached, but underneath the hurt lay a fierce relief. The twisted romance between Jason and Skylar had been exposed, and Autumn had drawn her line. She sank onto the sofa where the laptop lay. The city lights through the window gleamed like distant promises. Autumn Bennett closed her eyes, taking in the quiet and the knowledge that, at last, her home and her heart were hers to reclaim. In that moment, she understood the true depth of betrayal, not just a stranger's malice, but the collapse of a marriage once built on trust. And as the first tears of release welled, Autumn vowed, this time, she would rebuild on her own terms, stronger, wiser, and free of illusions. The following morning, Autumn Bennett awoke to a sharp clarity she'd never known before. The betrayal of Jason Caldwell and Skylar Pierce had purged her world of illusions, leaving behind one unassailable truth. She would not share her life, or her home, with anyone who had so callously conspired against her. She dressed in businesslike black trousers and a crisp white blouse, the fabric a visual echo of her resolve. Over the dining island lay 3 neatly stacked items. A blue folder marked divorce papers, a pen, and a copy of the penthouse deed showing Autumn as sole owner. Beneath them lay an envelope addressed to the Caldwell law firm. No small talk. No speeches, just the legal instruments that would sever the ties tying her to a past she refused to endure. At precisely 8:30 a.m., Jason stumbled into the kitchen, his face pale as a ghost. Shoulders slumped. He caught sight of the folder and froze mid-step. Autumn, his voice cracked. She met his gaze steadily as she poured herself a cup of black coffee. No sugar, no cream. Sit down. Jason swallowed, his habitually confident posture crumpling. He took a tentative step toward the breakfast nook and lowered himself into a chair. Autumn sat opposite him, placing the folder between them. I've drafted the divorce agreement, she said, voice calm but hard. It terminates our marriage, divides assets in accordance with the deed, and specifies that you relinquish any claim to the penthouse. Jason's eyes flicked to the deed. You already have the deed? She nodded. It was placed in my name before you, and Skylar hatched your plan. You'll get a fair split of the joint account, enough for a fresh start, but nothing more. Sign here. She tapped a signature line at the bottom of the first page. His fingers trembled as he reached for the pen. Autumn, Don't, she interrupted, lifting a hand. I don't want apologies. I want this done. I've spent 3 years compromising everything for this marriage. Now I'm choosing myself. He closed his eyes, pain etching every line of his face. Then, with a defeated sigh, he picked up the pen and signed. The scratch of ink felt louder than thunder in the empty room. He slid the folder back to her, words choking in his throat. There. It's done. Autumn placed the signed pages into the envelope. She paused, meeting his eyes. You have until 5 p.m. to vacate the penthouse, collect your belongings, and move out. Jason's jaw clenched. 5 hours. She stood, smoothing her blouse. Chop Nhoang, lightning, fast. She moved past him toward the front door, pausing only to retrieve the envelope. In the hallway, Mrs. Vivian Barrett appeared, still pale from shock but with a glint of something new, admiration, perhaps, in her eyes. She'd arrived earlier, having spent the night in a guest suite next door. Shame and remorse keeping her from home. Now she watched Autumn with quiet respect as Autumn crossed the threshold. Autumn, Vivian's voice trembled. Autumn stopped and turned. Mom? Vivian took a hesitant step forward. I heard. Autumn nodded. It's done. Vivian swallowed. I'm sorry I ever doubted you. She reached to place a hand on Autumn's arm, but Autumn gently withdrew. In this moment, I need distance, Autumn said softly. Not because I don't love you, but because I need space to rebuild. Vivian's eyes glistened. I understand. She hesitated, then added, if you ever need anything, you know where to find me. Autumn offered a brief nod and continued down the hallway. As she passed Jason's alcove, once reserved for guests, she paused. The sofa looked small, abandoned, a monument to Skylar's lies. She imagined lifting the velvet cushion to reveal the hidden recorder, her final piece of evidence. But she didn't stop. Some battles, she decided, were better left won quietly. Back in the living room, she dialed the Caldwell law firm. By mid-afternoon, a courier would collect the sealed envelope and file the paperwork. She glanced at her watch. 2:15 p.m. And already one signature down. 20 minutes later, a firm knock sounded at the door. Autumn opened it to find Jason Caldwell. Arms loaded with 2 duffel bags and a cardboard box of personal effects, photos of happier times, mementos, a framed wedding invitation. His eyes were rimmed red. I didn't want to leave like this, he murmured. But I understand. Autumn took a breath. I hope you find a life you deserve. He nodded and turned to go. But at the threshold he paused, as though drawn back. I never wanted her to have your home. Autumn met his gaze. Then you should never have sought her. He closed his eyes and left, the soft thud of the door echoing behind him. Autumn watched until he was out of sight, then exhaled, the tension draining from her shoulders. She returned to the kitchen and poured herself another mug of coffee. She stood at the island, staring at the city below. The rain had stopped, and sunbeams cut through the clouds, illuminating the bay in golden ribbons. In the quiet aftermath of the divorce, Autumn realized the true twist wasn't how fast it happened, but how liberating it felt. The papers lay filed, the keys reclaimed, and the pen she had once used to build a life together now marking its end. She pressed her palm to the window's cool glass. Ahead lay the ongoing process of healing and rebuilding, but for the first time in years, she felt unshakably in control of her destiny. And as the late afternoon light danced on the water, Autumn Bennett understood that some chapters must close swiftly to make way for the story you're truly meant to write. The morning light in Shoreline was deceptively calm, the scent of salt water drifting through open windows as Autumn Bennett sipped her coffee on the front porch of her new flower and coffee shop. Business had been quiet, comfortably so, during the first soft days after her divorce. She welcomed the peace. But elsewhere, the storm of Skylar Pierce's malice was only intensifying. 2 suburbs over, Jason Caldwell and Skylar huddled in a cramped one-bedroom apartment above a vacant storefront. The place reeked of damp carpet and poor ventilation, hardly the penthouse perfection Skylar once dreamed of. Yet here, amid peeling paint and buzzing fluorescent lights, she and Jason plotted their greatest crime. Jason pressed a thrift store mug into Skylar's trembling hand. We have to move fast, he muttered. His eyes, once soft with regret, now glinted with desperation. The divorce had stripped him of his claim to the penthouse and most of his savings. Only their wretched joint account of $20,000 remained. Skylar cradled the mug and sipped the bitter coffee. "We need $20,000 more," she said quietly. Beneath her soft facade lay a heart as cold as Seattle fog. "If we stage a hit-and-run, small collision, minor injuries, Evelyn Brooks and Morgan Caldwell will each file on their policies. That's at least $50,000 in total. That's enough to clear the mortgage deposit I promised you." Jason looked torn. But Mom's still fragile. He ran a hand through his hair. "If something really happens..." Skylar set her mug down, her nails tapping the chipped tabletop. "That's the point. We'll make it look like an unfortunate accident. You call 911, say you came upon a crash when you were coming home from the office. They'll tow their car. They'll get checked into Harborview. A few stitches for Evelyn's head laceration, Morgan's whiplash, they'll settle fast. Insurance writes the check." He swallowed. "And you're sure the adjuster won't dig deeper?" Skylar's smile was all predator. "No, because you're on the scene. Can't say I'm not helping. You're the one who found them. Professional caregiving accident. I've researched everything. Photos of skid marks, a broken taillight, witness call from the guy walking his dog." She tapped her phone. "I already sent the fake 911 transcript to your email." Jason exhaled, eyes flicking to the window as if seeing the penthouse in the distance. "If this works, we're free. I can start over, and we can finally be together." Skylar reached across the table, brushing her fingers against his. "Together," she repeated, voice soft with promise. "No more Autumn. No more penthouse. Just us." That same afternoon, Autumn Bennett sat at her shop's counter, arranging 3 fresh peony bouquets. Each was wrapped in pale pink tissue and tied with twine, destined for her mother's hospital room. Evelyn Brooks had been discharged 2 days earlier, recovering slowly in her condo with Morgan Caldwell beside her. Autumn had insisted on selling the Shoreline property and having them move in with her. Evelyn's health was too precious to risk another complication. Autumn dialed Morgan's number. It went to voicemail. She frowned and set down the last bouquet. "Hey, Morg, checking in. Did Mom take her meds okay?
Call me when you can.
Love, Autumn." She tapped send, then wiped her hands on her apron. Something in her gut prickled, a sense that the night held trouble. Later that evening, the sky had turned a bruised purple when Autumn arrived at her mother's condo with dinner: chicken broth soup, whole wheat crackers, and her mother's favorite fresh squeezed orange juice. Morgan met her at the door, face pale and eyes rimmed red. "Morgan, what's wrong?" Autumn asked, stepping inside. Morgan's voice trembled. "It was awful. You wouldn't believe." Autumn set the dinner on the kitchen island. "Slow down." Morgan pulled out her phone, hand shaking. "I'll show you the security footage." She led Autumn to the living room's tablet, swiped, and hit play. The video feed from the condo's driveway camera flickered in. At first, nothing unusual. Evelyn's silver Lexus pulled in at precisely 6 p.m. Then, almost immediately, a black SUV screeched around the corner at high speed. The camera caught the SUV's headlight clipping the Lexus's rear bumper with a loud thud. The Lexus swerved, then came to a stop halfway across the asphalt, passenger side door swinging open. Evelyn's figure stumbled out, legs buckling. Morgan sprang forward, gasping. But the video cut to a second camera near the sidewalk, showing Jason stepping out of the SUV's passenger door. He rushed to Evelyn, checking her pulse, then scanning around as if seeking a witness. A man walking a dog stopped and spoke to Jason, then jogged away. Jason turned and called something into his phone. Autumn's heart pounded. "Jason." Morgan nodded. "He said he came around the corner, heard the crash. Said he called 911 and checked on Mom until the ambulance came. Mom only has a mild concussion, some bruises. They're taking her to get a CAT scan as a precaution." Autumn shook her head, stomach twisting. "Show me the first angle again." Morgan replayed the footage and zoomed in on the license plate, a temporary dealer plate on the black SUV. It read PXV 2027. Autumn's pulse raced. She recognized that plate. It matched the small SUV Jason had driven the week before, one he told her was Mom's car for errands. "Jason has Evelyn's dealer car?" Autumn asked, voice tight. Morgan nodded. He said he borrowed it because his lease ended, and he'd pick up a rental later. Autumn turned away, pressing her palms to her eyes. The plan fell into place like shards of glass. Jason borrowed the SUV to stage the accident. The timing, 6 p.m. just as Morgan had left for work, meant only Evelyn and Jason were present. Marketing research on accidental insurance claims had indeed shown that accidents involving relatives often went uninvestigated. Evelyn's concussion and bruises would qualify, but not warrant a full police report. Then both Evelyn and Morgan would file claims on their separate policies, Morgan's new supplemental plan for adult children and Evelyn's long-term care rider. 2 claims, $50,000. Anger and betrayal flooded Autumn. She turned to Morgan. "We have to stop this. He's planning to hurt her again." Morgan's face paled. "Do you think he'd do it?" Skylar set it up. Jason executed it. Autumn clenched her fists. They need to be stopped. That night, Autumn could barely sleep. She lay in the darkened loft above her shop, the hum of the city a distant lullaby. Her mind replayed the footage, Skylar's velvet voice, Jason's eyes, once full of love, now cold with calculation. She realized that an accident like this could easily become fatal if Evelyn fell just the wrong way. Morning came too soon. Autumn dressed in dark jeans, a leather jacket and sturdy boots. Then loaded her car with emergency supplies, a first aid kit, her laptop, and a binder of evidence. She refused to go to the police without indisputable proof. But she would keep her mother safe tonight. At precisely 5:45 p.m., she sped through suburban streets to a small park adjacent to her mother's condo. It was a halfway point, one she could surveil discreetly. She parked behind a row of hedges, laptop open on the passenger seat, and checked the condo's driveway camera feed remotely via the security app on her phone. The camera showed the Lexus parked and Mrs. Barrett's dealer-plated SUV, Jason's, pulling into view. Skylar was absent, probably at her day job. Perfect. The plan relied on Jason acting alone that night. Autumn watched as Jason stepped out, glanced around, then moved toward the Lexus. He held something in his hand, his phone. Autumn zoomed in. It wasn't his phone. It was a small vial, capped, maybe syringes concealed in his coat pocket. Her heart thudded. He meant to give Evelyn something to worsen her condition. She didn't hesitate. Autumn grabbed the keys, laptop, and binder, jumped in her car, and pressed record on her phone camera. She drove around to the condo entrance, parked by the curb, and crept toward the driveway. Jason knelt beside the Lexus, lifting the passenger door. Evelyn was slumped inside, eyes closed, rattling softly. He tilted her chin up with a gloved hand. Autumn caught her breath. Evelyn was unconscious, not just concussed. He pressed the vial's dropper to her tongue. Evelyn's head lolled as she swallowed. Autumn's blood froze. Jason looked up and met her gaze in horror. He bolted to his feet, his cheeks draining of color. "Autumn," he shouted. She whipped out her phone, voice firm. "I have you on camera. Don't move." He froze. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand everything," Autumn snapped. "You and Skylar need money. So you're going to kill my mother for it." He darted forward. Autumn took a step back, raising her phone to record video and audio. "Stay there. Call Skylar now, and tell her I've seen you." Jason's face twisted between rage and fear. He reached for his coat.
Fine.
"I'll call her. Just don't do anything stupid." Autumn held her ground. "I'm calling the police." His eyes widened. "No, she'll kill you both." She shook her head. "You're dying of guilt already." He sank to his knees beside the Lexus, head in his hands. Autumn stood back, phone still recording. She stared at the scene, her fragile mother on a stretcher, terrified paramedics, the man she once loved in handcuffs. Her heart ached, but beneath the grief was fierce relief. Autumn had stopped them before it was too late. But she also knew the fallout would be monstrous. Criminal charges, media scrutiny, fractured family trust forever. Yet as the ambulance doors closed and Jason was led away, Autumn felt a hollow triumph. In the darkness of conspiracy and betrayal, she had been the one to act. She had saved her mother's life. And as the sirens faded, Autumn Bennett vowed that no scheme, no matter how cold or calculated, would ever threaten her family again. She would guard them with every ounce of strength she had left. Autumn Bennett followed the flashing blue lights up the winding driveway, her pulse thrumming in time with the siren's wail. EMS had just whisked her mother's silver Lexus into the ambulance bay at Harborview Medical Center, and 2 squad cars now blocked the condo's entrance. Officers milled about in rain slickers, their breath visible in the chill night air. Detective Marcus Hall, a veteran of the Bellevue PD Major Crimes Unit, stepped from the first cruiser. His midnight blue trench coat bore the precinct badge, and his sharp eyes took in the scene with practiced efficiency. Autumn, clutching her phone and the binder of evidence, approached him. "Ms. Bennett," Hall called, voice calm but authoritative. He extended a gloved hand. "I'm Detective Hall." Autumn nodded, offering a tight-lipped smile. "Thank you for coming." He glanced toward the ambulance ramp as EMTs secured her mother onto a gurney. "We'll make sure she's stable. Right now I need to hear from you. Tell me what happened." Autumn led him beside her car, sheltering her evidence from the drizzle under the awning. She laid out the binder, the printed screenshots of the driveway camera, and the recordings on her phone. Her heart pounded. This was the moment she'd prepared for, but now that it was here, the gravity of accusing her ex-husband and Skylar Pierce shook her resolve. "I witnessed my ex-husband, Jason Caldwell, deliberately administer a sedative to my mother in her car," Autumn said, voice steady despite the knot in her throat. She tapped a timestamp on the video still displayed on her phone. "Here, 1:04 a.m. He applied something from a small vial while she was unconscious. I called 911 immediately." Detective Hall watched the footage, brow furrowing. He tapped his earpiece. "Officer Schneider, secure the SUV for fingerprints and collect the vial. We'll need a full forensic sweep." Officers moved quickly. One gloved pair examined the black SUV's door handle and interior surfaces. Another bagged a tiny glass vial found in the driver's side glove compartment. Autumn felt a flicker of relief. Her meticulous planning was paying off. Hall turned back to her. "Where is Mr. Caldwell now?" "He was detained at the scene." Autumn pointed to the side entrance where 2 officers led Jason, hands cuffed behind his back. Jason's face was ashen. His eyes met Autumn's for a fleeting second, wide with regret, maybe fear. Then he looked away as the officers ushered him into the back of a cruiser. Detective Hall watched Jason disappear, then placed a reassuring hand on Autumn's arm. "We'll get protective custody for your mother and ensure her safety." Autumn exhaled, tension easing slightly. "Thank you." Hall consulted his tablet. "You mentioned another person involved, Skylar Pierce? We'll want to speak with her." Autumn nodded. "She works late at Pacific Crest Marketing on 12th Avenue.
She's not home right now." Hall tapped on his tablet.
"We'll send a unit to her workplace and then to her apartment. This is likely conspiracy to commit assault, maybe attempted manslaughter given her mother's condition." He met Autumn's gaze. "Do you feel safe returning home tonight?" Autumn glanced back toward her darkened storefront.
"Yes."
"I'll stay here." Hall nodded. "Good. We'll remain in contact. If anything else comes up, notes, emails, messages, bring it to us immediately." He slipped his badge back into his coat. A uniformed officer approached with a clipboard. Hall introduced Autumn to him as the primary witness. The officer began a formal statement, asking for dates, times, and descriptions. Autumn repeated the details she'd rehearsed: her arrival, the surveillance footage, the 911 call, her confrontation with Jason. The officer wrote swiftly, occasionally asking follow-up questions.
Meanwhile,
Detective Hall conferred quietly with the crime scene technicians. Their flashlights bobbed as they dusted for prints, photographed the interior of the SUV, and bagged tinted evidence. Autumn watched, her chest tight with both dread and determination. They were building a case. She had planted the seeds, and now justice was finally taking root. After an hour, Hall dismissed her, and the uniformed officer closed out the statement. Autumn packed her binder and phone away. Outside, the rain had eased to a steady mist. The night air felt cleansed, determined. Detective Hall gave Autumn a final nod. "We'll be in touch. You've done the right thing." Autumn managed a small smile. "Thank you, Detective." He opened the car door, about to leave, then hesitated. "One more thing, can you provide Lori Sanders' number?" He handed Autumn a business card. "She's our victim advocate. She'll help you get any protective orders you need." "Thank you," Autumn said, pocketing the card. As Hall's squad cars pulled away, Autumn turned to her mother's condo entry, now bathed in the bright lights of police floodlamps. Jason's cruiser idled at the curb, engine ticking in the cool air. Beyond it, EMTs wheeled Evelyn's gurney toward the ER doors, flanked by Morgan Caldwell hurrying beside them. Autumn's shoulders ached, but she felt the weight of each oppressive secret lifting. The police were now guardians of her family's safety, the binders of evidence ensuring that Skylar Pierce and Jason Caldwell would answer for their crimes. She unlocked her car door and settled into the driver's seat. The engine purred to life. As she pulled away, her phone buzzed with a text from Morgan. "Mom's okay, thank you. She's safe. I'll see you in the morning." Autumn tapped back. "See you then. Sleep well." Behind her, the police lights faded into the night, leaving only the misty glow of street lamps guiding her way home. Home now once again a place of refuge, rather than deceit. And as she drove through the quiet Seattle streets, Autumn Bennett felt the fierce pulse of new beginnings. The first light of dawn spilled across Autumn Bennett's flower shop in Shoreline, illuminating the chalkboard sign she'd painted by hand. "Bloom and brew. Fresh flowers, fresh starts." It was a simple message, but for Autumn, it encapsulated everything she had fought for over the past tumultuous weeks. Gone was the high-rise penthouse and the betrayal that had nearly destroyed her family. In its place stood a modest storefront filled with the scent of lilies, peonies, and rich roast coffee. Today was opening day, the official beginning of her second act. Inside, Autumn arranged armfuls of tulips and ran her fingers along the polished oak countertop. Each bouquet she crafted, a cascade of rose-pink ranunculus, a spray of purple hyacinths, felt like an affirmation of her strength and creativity. As she tied off the last ribbon with a flourish, memories of the hospital halls and courtroom dramas drifted through her mind. But those memories no longer anchored her in pain. They served as reminders of how far she'd come. In the back room, Evelyn Brooks, her mother, lifted a steaming cup of coffee with Morgan Caldwell's help. The two women laughed softly over shared stories. Evelyn's jokes about mixing up pills and Morgan's tales of awkward teenage summers. Autumn peeked through the doorway and smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. After everything they'd endured, they were together again, safer, stronger, and closer than ever. At precisely 9 a.m., Bloom and Brew opened its doors. The first customer was Mrs. Lee, an elderly neighbor who'd brought Autumn a homemade lemon loaf. "Congratulations, dear," Mrs. Lee beamed, setting the cake on a side table. "Your mother told me everything. You deserve this." Autumn hugged her, tears brimming. Moments like this, warmth, support, genuine kindness, cemented her belief that community could heal the deepest wounds. By mid-morning, the shop buzzed with activity. College students grabbed iced lattes and chatted at communal tables. Local teachers stopped in for posies to brighten their classrooms. A bridal party ordered cascading bouquets for an upcoming June wedding. Autumn crushed each order with precision, her confidence flourishing. The world beyond her doors no longer felt threatening. It beckoned with endless possibilities. At noon, a delivery truck rumbled to a stop outside. Autumn stepped outside to greet the driver, who handed her a crate of heirloom roses, pale apricot, cream, and blush pink. "Your iris and ivy supply," he said. Autumn thanked him, noting how each hip-high stem looked like a living promise of renewal. She arranged them in tall vases by the window, watching shoppers pause to admire their delicate blooms. In the afternoon lull, She sat at the counter and sketched new ideas for seasonal arrangements, wreaths for midsummer nights, wildflower posies for seaside weddings. Her pencil danced across the paper, each line a declaration that her creativity could flourish free of toxic entanglements. She paused only when her phone buzzed with a text from Detective Marcus Hall. "Good work today. Let me know if you need witness protection." Autumn typed back a quick thanks, then set the phone aside. Late afternoon brought a surprise. Ethan Marlowe stepped through the door, carrying a canvas tote from his architecture studio. Beneath his arm was a prototype wooden planter Autumn had designed months ago. He grinned, eyes soft. "It's perfect," he said. "I wanted a planter that feels organic but minimalist for the lobby at Bellevue Art Center." Autumn's heart fluttered. They had reconnected at a community design fair weeks earlier, but this was their first real collaboration. She poured him a cup of dark roast. As they sat at a corner table, they shared ideas, Ethan's architectural lines, Autumn's botanical textures, and laughter wove between them. For the first time in years, Autumn felt fully herself, creative, respected, and seen. Evening arrived, and the shop's lights glowed like lanterns against the dusky sky. Autumn closed up, wiping down counters and counting the day's receipts. She locked the front door, then stepped out to breathe in the salt, wet air. Across the street, the sound shimmered in twilight. Autumn inhaled deeply, savoring the moment. Tonight, she would return home to her mother and Morgan, safe, whole, and ready for whatever tomorrow held. Back at home, the three of them shared a simple dinner around the kitchen island: grilled salmon, steamed asparagus, and bowls of bright cherry tomatoes. Evelyn lifted her glass of orange juice. "To new beginnings," she toasted, her eyes shining. Morgan joined in, and Autumn raised her water glass. "To family," Autumn said, voice thick with emotion. "And to building a life that's ours, on our terms." They clinked glasses, laughter echoing through the cozy condo. Autumn felt every fiber of her being alight with purpose. She had been forged in crisis, betrayal, danger, and heartbreak. But tonight, she stood reborn. Later, as she settled into bed, Autumn reviewed her sketchbook and jotted notes for tomorrow's orders: a wildflower workshop, a bouquet for a friend's promotion, a proposal for a summer flower truck pop-up. Her life had become a tapestry of color, connection, and creation, far richer than the gilded cage she'd left behind. Before sleep claimed her, Autumn closed her eyes and whispered a promise to herself: "No matter what storms arise, I will bloom again." And with that, Autumn Bennett drifted into dreams of petals and sunrise, comfortable in the knowledge that her greatest flourishing lay ahead. Late summer in Shoreline carried a golden warmth that lingered well into the evening. At Bloom and Brew, the shop's sign glowed softly beneath a sky streaked with apricot and lilac. Inside, Autumn Bennett was finishing a custom arrangement of sunflowers, sea holly, and trailing ivy, her touch as deft as sunlight filtering through leaves. She carefully wrapped it in craft paper and tied it with natural twine, then glanced at the clock: 7:45 p.m. Her heart fluttered. Tonight, she wasn't heading home to her mother's condo or closing early after a long day of business. Instead, she was meeting Ethan Marlowe, the architect whose firm had commissioned her for planters at Bellevue Art Center. Their collaboration over the past month had blossomed into daily conversations, coffee dates, and the kind of comfortable laughter that felt like sunlight on bare skin. She slid the bouquet into a protective cylinder and locked the register. The shop was empty now, save for the gentle hum of the espresso machine resting on standby. Autumn bolted the door and stepped onto the sidewalk, inhaling the salty breeze off Puget Sound. A short walk west would bring her to the cafe where Ethan waited, Luna and Slate, a cozy spot with reclaimed wood tables and Edison bulb lanterns. As she approached the cafe's glowing facade, Autumn spotted Ethan through the window, sitting at a corner table, laptop open, sketching floor plans for the art center's botanical terrace. His dark hair caught the light, and his navy blazer looked crisp against his white shirt. When he glanced up and recognized her, his face lit with that signature half-smile that made her chest tighten with anticipation. He stood to greet her, pulling out the chair. "These are stunning," he said, nodding at the bouquet she carried. "You outdid yourself." Autumn smiled, setting the flowers in the center of the table. "I thought you'd like a few extras for the meeting tomorrow." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thanks for staying late." Ethan waved off her thanks. "Your work is worth it, and I couldn't wait." His eyes held a warmth that felt like home. He closed his laptop, leaning forward. "How are things?" "At the shop." "With your mom?" She exhaled, relaxing into his calm presence. "Good. Mom's fully recovered, no more scares. Morgan's got her settled in, and they're planning to come by the shop this weekend." Autumn's voice softened. "I finally feel like we're all okay." Ethan reached across the table, his palm gentle on hers.
I'm glad.
The contact sent a pleasant thrill through her. "You've been through so much, Autumn. You deserve to relax for a bit." She hesitated, then nodded. "Actually, I was thinking, tomorrow, after the art center meeting, would you like to show me that new sculpture garden at Inglewood Beach? I mean, if you're free." Ethan's grin brightened. "I'd love that." He gave her hand a quick squeeze before releasing it. They ordered dinner, flatbreads and salads, and settled into easy conversation. Autumn told him about future pop-up ideas, a mobile florist truck for local markets, floral design workshops, custom arrangements for weddings. Ethan shared his own ambitions, sustainable materials in public architecture, integrating green spaces into urban design, launching a community garden project at his alma mater. Between bites, Autumn felt a deep connection she'd never known before. Ethan listened with genuine interest, his gaze never wavering. When she laughed, he joined her, not out of politeness, but because he truly found her joy infectious. After dinner, they walked along the waterfront promenade, lanterns overhead casting a warm glow on damp cobblestones. The sound's breeze teased Autumn's hair, and the rhythmic lap of waves provided a gentle score to their steps. Ethan paused, facing her. "Autumn, you've built something incredible here. Your shop, your life. I'm in awe." She tilted her head, touched and bashful. "I had to rebuild. It wasn't easy." He reached out, brushing a petal from her bouquet that had caught on her sleeve. "And in doing so, you've created space for something beautiful, life, love, all of it. I hope I can be part of that." Her breath caught. The honesty in his voice, the warmth in his eyes, felt like a promise. She placed her hand on his. "I'd like that." Just then, the distant chime of church bells rang out, the hour turning toward night's quiet. Autumn looked up at the stars winking through lingering clouds. Everything felt right. The crisp air, the salty tang. Ethan's hand in hers. They found a bench overlooking the water. Autumn set the bouquet beside them. Ethan turned to face her. "Can I ask something?" She nodded. He took a gentle breath. "What do you want most right now?" Autumn considered. The safety of her mother, the thriving of her shop, the shock of betrayal still echoing in her mind. But as she gazed at Ethan's hopeful face, she knew. "I want to trust again," she said softly. "I want to build a life that isn't defined by pain, but by everything that follows. Including you." Ethan's smile was radiant. He leaned in, and Autumn closed the gap. Their lips met in a gentle, searching kiss, soft as a petal unfolding. In that moment, time seemed to slow, the sounds whispering waves, the distant hum of the town, the lantern-lit path, all melted away, leaving only them and the promise of something real. They broke apart, foreheads resting together. "You're amazing," Ethan whispered. Autumn brushed his cheek. "So are you." The night air cooled, and he slipped his arm around her shoulders. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the moon's reflection quiver across the water. Autumn's heart swelled with hope. For the first time in years, she felt truly at peace, safe, loved, and ready for whatever came next. Walking back to her car, Ethan looped his arm through hers. "I know I said I'll help with planters, but I'd love to help with anything, School runs for your mom, paperwork at the shop, anything.
She grinned.
I might take you up on that.
He laughed.
Good. Autumn opened her car door and turned, facing him.
Thank you for tonight.
For everything. He stepped closer, brushing a tender kiss to her knuckles. This is just the beginning. She smiled, stepping inside. As the car doors closed, she looked back to see Ethan standing in the streetlight, silhouette strong and welcoming. She waved, heart full. As Autumn drove home under a canopy of stars, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Shattered trust, near tragedy, fierce determination, and unwavering love from her mother and Morgan. Now, with Ethan by her side and a life rebuilt on honesty and creativity, Autumn Bennett felt ready to embrace every sunrise. Tomorrow, Bloom and Brew would open its doors again, fresh flowers, fresh coffee, fresh hope. And at the heart of it all, a woman who had risked everything to protect her family, only to discover that true love awaited when she least expected it. For in the soft glow of summer nights, Autumn found the greatest bloom of all, a love that was, at last, real. And that brings us to the end of today's story on TrueStory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.